Tonight, after Jimmy Kimmel was yanked off the air, Donald Trump takes aim at late night.
All they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that.
The U.S. president threatening to pull broadcast licenses for networks that criticize him as late night fires back.
You know what my community values are, Buster? Freedom of speech. Or
the deepening fears over the future of free speech. Trade mission to Mexico. Canada's prime minister looks for a stronger partnership amid tensions with the U.S.
Plan Mexico, Canada strong.
Rosie and the Ad Issue team are standing by. And Canadian pumpkin patches struggling this fall.
We can't really run it if we don't have the pumpkins.
While your jack-o'-lantern might be a little bit smaller and a little bit harder to find.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. After a Trump administration threat took late-night comedian Jimmy Kimmel off the air, now Donald Trump says TV networks that are against him could face retribution, adding fuel to fears that his administration is ready to use state power to silence critics. ABC preempted Jimmy Kimmel Live last night after the Trump-appointed FCC chair threatened action against the network. The reason? Kimmel's comments earlier this week about slain conservative activist Charlie Kirk. But Trump now suggests that networks that give him only bad press, he says, should have their broadcast licenses suspended. Paul Hunter now with Trump's latest threat and the fierce debate raging over free speech.
ABC, grow a spine!
In New York, they chanted ABC, grow a spine, outside the offices of ABC parent company Disney. In Los Angeles, more demonstrators, equally angry over the fate of ABC's late-night comedy talk show Jimmy Kimmel Live.
This is unprecedented. We are looking at an authoritarian government crackdown on free speech.
The sudden suspension of Kimmel's program, that's him leaving early when ABC pulled his show from the air, has brought widespread outcry in the U.S. Esteemed former nightly talk show host David Letterman now weighing in, slamming ABC for caving under pressure.
You can't go around firing somebody because you're fearful or trying to suck up to an authoritarian criminal administration in the Oval Office. That's just not how this works.
In case you missed it, here's Kimmel in his opening monologue Monday.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
That framing of the fallout from the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk led to a group that owns some 200 U.S. TV stations saying they'd stop airing Kimmel.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
And as well, pressure seemingly for ABC to take action on Kimmel from Brendan Carr, the Donald Trump-appointed chair of U.S. broadcasting regulator, the FCC.
That's censorship. That's state speech control. That's not America.
Announcing a new bill aimed at protecting free speech in this country, Democrats call the apparent federal targeting of Kimmel abhorrent, obnoxious, and repulsive.
This is an assault on everything this country has stood for since the Constitution's been signed.
Trump himself cited Kimmel's ratings.
They should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Later telling reporters major American networks give him negative coverage 97% of the time, suggesting action against those networks could follow.
If they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr.
Trump there referencing Brendan Carr, Adrian, chair of the FCC. Carr said today regarding all of this that the focus for the FCC is simply to ensure, as he put it, broadcasters are serving the public interest.
And Paul, tonight is the first time that the other late-night hosts have a chance to weigh in on Kimmel's suspension.
Including, of course, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Adrienne. Recall we learned not long ago that that show is not being renewed. Some say due to political pressure because Colbert has been a big-time critic of Donald Trump over the years. His network, though, insisting the program is ending for financial reasons. Regardless, in his show tonight, Colbert speaks about Kimmel. Here's a clip as he first references the FCC's Brendan Carr.
This may seem bad, but Carr was quick to reassure everyone, posting, "While this may be an unprecedented decision, it is important for broadcasters to push back on Disney programming that they determine falls short of community values." Well, you know what my community values are, Buster? Freedom of speech.
Stephen Colbert tonight on the Jimmy Kimmel situation. Adrienne Colbert also calling the whole thing blatant censorship.
All right, Paul Hunter in Washington. Well, late-night hosts may be standing up for Kimmel, as Eli Glasner shows us. There's growing concern that big media companies facing government threats just keep folding.
After ABC suspended Kimmel's show, comedians are ringing the alarm bell.
This is what authoritarianism looks like. Look, if they can come for Kimmel, they can come for anybody.
It's more than just a notable moment. It's a scary moment.
Bill Carter writes about late-night television and has followed the Nexstar Media Group, which operates dozens of ABC affiliate stations, and was the first to announce it was preempting Kimmel.
Who are they? Why are they important?
Well, they're a big station group which had reached the maximum allowed by law.
To keep growing, Carter says they need Washington to change the law.
So they have a gigantic vested interest in making the Trump administration happy.
Nexstar was followed by Sinclair, another major owner of many affiliates, who announced they would not air Kimmel. That put pressure on Disney-owned ABC itself, all responding to the FCC's threat and the power Washington wields.
So they're all struggling with that. And then there are a few big companies, and I would say each and every one of those big companies has some vulnerability to being hobbled by this administration.
Led by a president who just days ago threatened an ABC reporter asking about the Department of Justice's push to go after hate speech.
They'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC.
ABC is just one of Trump's targets. CBS paid $16 million to settle a lawsuit with Trump over how 60 Minutes edited an interview with Kamala Harris.
Before we start the show, I want to let
Then there's Stephen Colbert. In July, CBS decided to end the most popular show in late night, hosted by the vocal Trump critic.
I hear Jimmy Kimmel is next. Nope, no, absolutely not Kimmel. I am the martyr.
1 week after the announcement, Washington approved the merger of CBS owner Paramount with Skydance. With a new $15 billion lawsuit launched at the New York Times, the cuts to funding hurting NPR and PBS, and the president already taking aim at other late-night hosts sharing on social media, that leaves Jimmy and Seth. Do it, NBC. Hollywood watchers say the threat of more action is already having a chilling effect.
So there's a feeling of dread. There's a feeling that the media companies are just bending the knee one after the other. And where does this stop?
And that's definitely what I'm hearing. The people in the industry are shaken and I think concerned about this unprecedented moment.
And in the background of all of this, Eli, is the complicated matter of corporate ownership in the U.S.
And that, Adrienne, is a real pressure point for Trump. Take CBS. So that is owned by Paramount Skydance. They are looking to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which would give them control of companies like CNN and HBO Max. Now, the owner of Skydance is David Ellison, who Trump, by the way, calls a great man. David's father is Larry Ellison, major Trump supporter, richest man in the world, and involved in a deal for TikTok. So lots of big power players in close proximity to the White House.
All right, Eli, thank you.
My pleasure.
The U.S. ambassador to Canada says he is disappointed about anti-American sentiment he sees here.
I'm disappointed that I came to Canada, a Canada that it is very, very difficult to find Canadians who are passionate about the American-Canadian relationship. Elbows up, me too. You know, it was an anti-American campaign. That has continued. That's disappointing.
Pete Hoekstra went on to say the two countries are not in a trade war, rather a dispute. He says if the U.S. was really at war with Canada, the country would know it. Now to some late-breaking news out of Mexico. Prime Minister Mark Carney just took questions from reporters after meeting with top officials there to get a vital trade relationship back on track. Evan Dyer has been watching it all. So, Evan, can you bring us up to speed?
Adrienne, the Canadian and Mexican leaders appear to have smoothed over the tensions that emerged following the election of Donald Trump when he succeeded in driving a wedge between the two countries with his tariff plans, causing some Canadian politicians to suggest that Mexico should be cut out of the CUSMA trade deal. These are two countries that face a common threat, and they seem to have decided they're stronger facing it together.
We are both undertaking massive transformations of our economy. Plan Mexico, Canada strong. Our efforts will be strengthened by working together.
Mexico and Canada want to do more on two fronts. First, work together to save North America-wide free trade by coordinating strategies for next year's review of CUSMA, the trade deal that replaced the original NAFTA 5 years ago.
How do we eliminate these tariffs that we both face prior to the end of the year so that we can have a fruitful discussion on the USMCA future beginning in 2026?
The two countries also have to cooperate without provoking the Trump administration.
So we're going to be very careful to make sure that the visit is not portrayed as some kind of strategic meeting or ganging up in some way with the White House.
But both countries know they can't count on restoring normal trade with the U.S., and both are looking for new partners.
It's a chance for us to talk not just about the tariff dispute that's underway, but also what are we going to be able to do to deepen our bilateral relationships with each other. We've spent way too much time ignoring each other. Now it's time to do more.
President Sheinbaum said she wanted to strengthen maritime trade with Canada. Mexico is in the middle of a huge renewal of its infrastructure, including airports, seaports, and rail. But the Mexicans are concerned that Canada's ports aren't big enough to handle the volume of trade they'd like to see. Adrienne, Mexican officials are even talking about becoming directly involved in the expansion of Canadian ports, perhaps even helping to build terminals dedicated to Canada-Mexico trade. Mexico is becoming a wealthier country. It's now the world's 12th biggest economy, and the government here wants to raise the standard of living. President Sheinbaum said this morning she wants to question Carney about Canada's healthcare system with a view to possibly reproducing it here. Adrienne.
All right, that's Evan Dyer in Mexico City tonight. CBC News has learned that Mexico has assigned elite federal agents to hunt for Canadian fugitive Ryan Wedding. The alleged drug kingpin, who's on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, is believed to be living in Mexico, and the U.S. has been pressuring that country to crack down on major drug cartels. In 2002, Wedding represented Canada as an Olympic snowboarder. Now the U.S. is offering up to $10 million for information leading to his arrest. Well, former Justice Minister David Lametti will be Canada's next ambassador to the UN. So yesterday, we told you Lametti left his role as the Prime Minister's principal secretary. He takes over from Canada's outgoing UN representative, Bob Rae, in November. After 2 days of pageantry and deals, Donald Trump's visit to the UK has come to an end. Before heading home, the American president and the British Prime Minister faced the press. Chris Brown on how they handled the more divisive questions.
The Red Devils dropped in on Donald Trump and Keir Starmer as the U.S. president's state visit turned to business with the signing of deals on artificial intelligence and nuclear reactors. There was some cringe-worthy flattery.
He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us.
But confronting the media was the big test of this visit for two leaders who differ on significant issues, notably the war in Gaza. Britain plans to recognize a Palestinian state next week.
We absolutely agree on the need for peace and a roadmap because the situation in Gaza is intolerable.
Trump, who says he's the greatest friend Israel has ever had, disagreed, but fairly politely.
So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score. Okay? One of our few disagreements, actually.
On Ukraine, Trump's friendly relationship with Russia's Vladimir Putin is another contentious point.
He's let me down. He's really let me down.
If that's so, why not hit Russia with much harder sanctions was the question. Trump said Europe must stop buying Russian oil first.
If I may, the elephant in the room.
On Starmer's recent firing of Lord Peter Mandelson as the U.S. ambassador because of his historic ties to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, who Trump also associated with, Trump deflected.
Thank you very much,
I
sir.
don't know him, actually. I had heard that, and I think maybe the Prime Minister would be better speaking of that. That was a choice that he made, and I don't know. What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed.
But that was about as awkward as things got. The King and Queen, who Trump called fantastic people, said their goodbyes, and so did the Starmers, with smiles all round. Donald Trump appeared to bask in the royal color and spectacle that was rolled out for him, which may explain why there were no sharp words. For Keir Starmer, having Trump leave happy was what this visit was all about. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Back in Canada, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith plans to use the notwithstanding clause on 3 laws affecting transgender people. That is according to a leaked government memo obtained by the Canadian press. The clause can be used by provinces to override certain charter rights. The 3 laws introduced last year set rules for students changing their names or pronouns in school, banning transgender girls from participating in female sports, and limiting gender-affirming health care. 2 of the laws are currently being challenged in court. And the Trump administration has made more cuts to scientific funding, this time hitting experimental trials for children with brain cancer. As Alison Northcott shows us, families here in Canada are feeling the impact too.
She's spunky, she's smart.
Emmett Doolin was diagnosed with brain cancer just days after she was born. She had chemo at 3 weeks, but soon joined a clinical trial at the BC Children's Hospital, a treatment targeting her type of tumor.
It's been the best thing that's ever happened to her. As much as these kids are resilient, with all the harsh side effects from chemo, I don't think she would have lasted this long.
Clinical trials can be a last hope for some children with hard-to-treat cancers. But Canadian researchers say funding and policy changes in the U.S. have forced at least 5 clinical trials in Canada to stop enrollment. The Trump administration is not renewing funding for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Consortium. It doesn't affect Emmett's trial, but Toronto Sick Kids Hospital had to stop enrolling new patients in 3 clinical trials.
They're some of the most promising therapies for children with those particular diseases, and there are really not studies of equivalent promise that we have access to.
The U.S. National Institutes of Health says it's moving the group's work to a broader network to align resources and strengthen pediatric brain tumor research. It says it plans to find ways for Canadian institutions to enroll in clinical trials in the future. But that network has halted funding for trials outside the U.S., including trials in Canada. While the number of children affected is small, it's still a big loss, says this pediatric neurosurgeon.
We actually had 2 patients recently who had difficult to treat treatment-refractory brain cancers who could have been eligible for one of those trials, but now those trials have been closed.
She and other experts say the Canadian government needs to build capacity to do more clinical trials here. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
In a year that saw several major retailers file for bankruptcy, one Quebec-based company is expanding.
They're sort of a big Canadian success story by being careful.
How Simons is continuing to grow as other stores struggle. Next. Plus, as Halloween approaches, pumpkin farmers are warning about a bad crop.
Here is just a really immature pumpkin.
What it could mean for your jack-o'-lantern this fall. And later, a huge step for a massive railway project deep inside a European mountain range.
It was kind of pure joy.
The historic connection. We're back in 2 minutes. Toyota has recalled more than 70,000 vehicles in Canada over a software problem that could lead to an increased risk of crashing. More than a dozen models are affected. They all share the same display panels. Toyota and Hyundai issued a similar recall in the U.S. this week, affecting more than 1 million vehicles. Well, in a retail landscape marked with widespread closures and bankruptcies, one Canadian store is expanding. Quebec-based Simons is opening the doors to its new Toronto location, and as Sophia Harris shows us, it is betting on its humble roots to attract shoppers.
Yeah.
It may be tough times for the retail industry, but not here. Simon's, a Quebec-based family-owned clothing and houseware store, is expanding. The latest, this Toronto location. One of 2 new Simon stores to open this year.
We're privileged to have a very loyal Canadian following. Perhaps the fact that we're the heritage Canadian brand now is something that's positive, and certainly the client is responding positively to.
The expansion is noteworthy. This new location in downtown Toronto's Eaton Centre Mall saw the demise of department stores Eaton's, then Sears, then Nordstrom in Canada. And neighboring Hudson's Bay shut its stores in June after the storied company fell deep into debt.
A lot of these retailers lost relevancy. They focused on the wrong customer segment. They offered the wrong product selection at the wrong value proposition. And they let Amazon and online retailers eat their lunch.
But at Simon's, sales are up. This analyst says the retailer is bucking the trend by expanding carefully.
They really only started to expand in the last decade or so. They're sort of a big Canadian success story by being careful.
Simon's also offers a range of prices and styles, including exclusive brands only found in its 19 stores.
I love their style because you can't find a lot of their styles in the other stores that are here.
The price point is quite right for, people in our age group, millennials, I suppose. And also the clothing lasts.
Despite its success, Simon says it will continue to proceed cautiously.
Our feet are on the ground. We're going to stay very humble.
It's a formula that's working so far. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
A warning tonight that an abnormally dry summer is putting a Halloween staple at risk.
Anytime you don't have the yield that you were planning on, again, it's going to be on your bottom line.
How pumpkin farmers are dealing with a difficult harvest. Plus, after the break, Rosie's here with that issue. Hey, Rosie.
Hey, Adrienne, with a budget date now confirmed, tonight we're going to talk about Mark Carney's trip to Mexico and Canada's economic outlook.
When we're looking at the next federal budget, you would expect that a lot of the costs that Canada to carry is directly related to the trade war.
So what will the next budget tell us about Canada's spending habits? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and a whole lot more.
Finding the perfect pumpkin might be more difficult this Halloween. Farmers are warning about fewer, smaller gourds, and they are not happy. Sarah Levitt shows us what they're facing.
Sylvain Etier says only one pumpkin grew on this vine, and many of his plants are drying and rotting, something he's seeing all across his field.
Il y a un 30 à 40% moins de citrouilles dans le champ.
Etier says his pumpkin yield this year is 30 to 40% less than normal. Heavy rain in early July, followed by almost no rain for a month and a half, made for unhealthy fruit. It's a problem many pumpkin farmers are facing, particularly in eastern Canada. According to the Canadian Drought Monitor, around 70% of the country's farmland has been abnormally dry this summer. On Prince Edward Island, Mackenzie Produce is really feeling it this year.
This is probably 33 years since I've been on this operation, and there's only been 1 or 2 years that by records show a struggle such as this.
With Thanksgiving and Halloween around the corner, it's peak pumpkin time.
Anytime you don't have the yield that you were planning on, again, it's going to be on your bottom line. Our input costs were all still the same, so seed prices weren't reduced.
And here is just a really immature pumpkin.
At Black Fox Farm and Distillery in Saskatoon, the weather also didn't cooperate. But in this case, there was too much rain and cool temperatures. So this year, their highlight event, the Pumpkin Festival, had to be canceled.
We had games for the kids and wagon rides and pumpkin soup and pumpkin donuts and pumpkin pie. But we can't really run it if we don't have the pumpkins.
Farmers, always at the mercy of the weather, worry the more frequent unpredictability will lead to tough years ahead, with Canadians turning away from local crop and instead to imported pumpkins to satisfy their jack-o'-lantern needs. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, Canada's economic outlook, weak growth, slowing job numbers, and tariffs, all factors that will make the federal budget on November 4th a challenge.
I would say it's the best date if you look at the parliamentary calendar.
The budget delayed partly due to international summits and meetings like the Prime Minister's current trip to Mexico.
The Prime Minister is busy, looking busy, flying around, grip and grin, pretending to do a lot while doing very little.
So what will the next budget tell us about Canada's spending habits? What might come from this brief trade mission to Mexico? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it down tonight. Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Andrew, let's start with you. We've got a date now, perhaps a little bit later for the budget than we anticipated on Monday, pushing into November. But all those things that I mentioned there are factors that are making it difficult to come up with, I guess, that's what the government says, a budget for right now. What do you make of where they have landed on the date? Well, it may also be because they're struggling to make the numbers add up. Look, the situation is deteriorating. This time, the last budget, which was 18 months ago, the budget for this year was supposed to be budget deficit for this year was supposed to be $39 billion. By the last spring Liberal platform, it was $62 billion. The C.D. Howe Institute in July said it's $92 billion, but the economy shrunk since then. It shrunk certainly 3 months in a row, maybe 6 months. So we could be looking at a number over $100 billion for all we know by this point. So we've had that message, that letter from the finance minister to his colleagues saying you've got to cut spending by 15% over 3 years, but then we find out that doesn't apply to about 2/3 of federal spending. When the C.D. Howe Institute looked at the numbers, they said that adds up to about a $22 billion cut over 3 years from a budget of over $500 billion. With a deficit of $100 billion, with all of the defense spending coming down the road in years to come, I don't think we're close to coming to grips with the fiscal situation. Prime Minister said the other day that they're still going to just achieve cuts in the federal payroll from attrition. I suspect that they're punting a bit. I think they're going to try to put off the really hard work until after the next election, if then. But part of why Mark Carney is down in Mexico is not just, to make sure the relationship is good, but it's also because obviously the numbers are in part that way because of what has happened with the tariff war, and in part because, as Andrew points out, some of the big spending promises the government made. Is that something you think, Chantal, that Canadians are going to buy, that as Mark Carney says, we are in the worst economic crisis of our time?
I don't know if they're going to buy that we are in the worst economic crisis of our time, but they will certainly buy the fact that we are in the least predictable and least positive juncture in a long, long time. Sure. And in a situation where we lived through the 90s and the deficit wall then, and Paul Martin doing what he had to do. But at that point, we mostly had control over what we were doing. Other things were stable. We didn't have this tariff issue. We kind of knew where all the marks were. This isn't the case. There is a lot of things we don't know. We don't even know if in 6 months the U.S. will still want to renegotiate CUSMA, or just say we don't really care about this deal anymore unless you sign up for more concessions that will cost. But I agree with Andrew, the economy is deteriorating fast. Unemployment is going up quickly, and that's not going to stop. And I'm starting to think that maybe in hindsight, the government regrets not having brought in a quickie budget last June. Rather than have this situation, especially since last June, no opposition party, including the Conservatives, would have felt like bringing down the government. But the more the weeks go on and the situation deteriorates, the more that temptation will be there. I'm not predicting an election on that basis, but still, it becomes more complicated. Then the other question the Liberals have to ask themselves is, if it's going to get worse, do we want to survive the budget and delay it till we're weaker in an election? Those are all questions to which I don't have answers, but they're all facing the government at this point.
And I mean, the other question they could be asking themselves, Althea, is there any promise or thing we should be scaling back here because we're in such dire straits? And it doesn't seem that that is a consideration at this point, but you have to wonder why that's not also on the table.
Well, it seems like climate change has definitely taken a back seat, I would say. It's interesting that Chantal mentions like maybe the Liberals would want to have an election right now, because that is certainly the sentiment among the opposition, i.e. nobody wants to vote for this budget because everybody fears the sticker shock on the size of the deficit. And there seems to be poison pills for every opposition party in this budget, either too much spending or too many cuts, or cuts that are that we're told will happen later, to Andrew's point. I find that very interesting. The other point I think that's worth mentioning, I agree with everything my colleagues have said so far, but that the prescriptions that Mark Carney has outlined for this moment in time are prescriptions that he talks about in his book, Values, which is from 2021. And a lot of these prescriptions sound pretty similar to Canadians if they paid attention to what Justin Trudeau was saying, especially in the early part of his mandate. It's just that the price tags are a lot bigger now. So I think at some point the government is going to have to explain why it thinks it can succeed with similar policies, at least similar philosophically intued policies. I'm thinking of like the housing spend, for example, where Justin Trudeau failed. That, I think, is a reason why perhaps not just the opposition, but the Liberals might start thinking about going now rather than going in the spring on the spring budget.
And Andrew, how long will people, do you think, give the Prime Minister to try and turn things around? It hasn't been very long, to be fair. No. And, you would at least get a budget to sort of see, I think Canadians would give him a budget to sort of see where are things at. Can he make some improvements here with his economic vision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many months or years people will give him. I think, as you say, they've given him the benefit of the doubt until now, probably rightly so. The budget will certainly be a reckoning point. I think with these things, there has to be a sense that you're getting your arms around the problem, that you're making progress against it, that you know what you're doing. If you look like events are getting away from you, that you're running on the spot to catch up, then people can smell that. They can smell when a government is losing confidence and competence in the face of large problems. So that's the absolute lowest bar that they have to get over in this budget, is look like they've actually grasp the size of the problem and have a plan to get forward towards it. As I say, I doubt whether they're going to execute the whole of the plan at this point, because the spending cuts at this point, to me, look like they're going to have to be a lot deeper than what they're talking about. We are going to have to, for example, to start talking about a reform of, cuts to, transfers to the provinces and transfers to individuals. You cannot wall off such enormous parts of the budget from any cuts when you're engaged in this kind of exercise. The other thing they have to be thinking about is, how do we start grappling with the growth problem in this country? You know, it really is true in the long run that if you want to get out of your fiscal hole, you have to get faster growth. It doesn't solve things in the short run, but in the long run, that's absolutely key to restoring fiscal health to this country.
Okay, about 30 seconds, Chantal.
Yes, at this point, the benefit of the doubt is in part due to Mark Carney, but in part because voters are saying they're not seeing that the alternative would do better. So Mr. Poilievre basically has the next few months to convince more Canadians that he could handle all of these issues in a more efficient way than Mark Carney. And that, so far, has not happened.
Well, and you wonder if you are in an economic crisis, again, is there an advantage there for the current Prime Minister? Maybe not, but there might be as well. Okay, we're going to leave this part here. When we come back, we'll take a look at the departure of Chrystia Freeland from Cabinet.
Talk to us about your new job. How about some sort of soundbite?
It's a great day. Thank you.
Can you tell us?
So what do changes in Carney's cabinet mean? Is the Prime Minister rebranding the Liberal Party? That's next. At issue. Carney cabinet shifts. Chrystia Freeland has resigned from cabinet to take on a position to help Ukraine. This is just one of the changes coming to the Liberal team. David Lametti is leaving the Prime Minister's office to become Canada's representative to the United Nations, and Bill Blair will soon be named the UK High Commissioner.
And how about any diplomatic appointments? Should we be expecting to see you in the House for the entire term, or what's on the horizon for you?
Right now I'm focused entirely entirely on working and serving my community and this government.
So what do these changes mean? And is the Prime Minister trying to make a team that better fits his needs and his image? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Althea, your thoughts on maybe you want to start with Chrystia Freeland or some of the other moves that we have seen or are expecting?
I think the general theme is that Mark Carney is managing disappointment. Ms. Freeland, I'm told, has barely met with any of her stakeholders at Transport, so she obviously had her foot out the door for a while now. David Lametti was offered a job that was held by somebody who didn't leave the job, so that was an interesting HR issue to resolve. And David Lametti is a close friend of Mark Carney's. Bill Blair, Jonathan Wilkinson is another name that's kind of been rumored to be headed towards the exit. These are two former cabinet ministers who assumed that they would have a place at Mark Carney's cabinet table, and there was no room for them. So they, again, I guess, getting a nice little reward. Now, there are others who expected to be appointed to cabinet and weren't. Are they going to take their own leave? There may be people leaving for policy issues as well in the months to come, and there may be people who leave for the Ontario Liberal leadership. I think what it shows, though, and to your point, there were talks in the lead up to the March-April election that there were people Mark Carney wanted to bring in, but they just didn't have time. They had private sector jobs and they couldn't get out of it. So there are some nice safe seats in Toronto that have opened up. But I think part of it is not this grand strategy, I'm not Justin Trudeau, although this government is kind of obsessed with that theme. I think it's really like, you have all these people who don't want to be here and could make my life miserable. What can I do for them?
Chantal.
I also think the circumstances that brought Mark Carney, one to the Liberal leadership and then to that quick election, did not allow him to build a team. So we are seeing another thing that is unprecedented. You do not usually see the Parliament return for the first time under a so-called new government and see a leading figure of the government resign from cabinet and be replaced by nobody. And that's the tell. We did not swear in a new transport minister to replace Chrystia Freeland this week. We added our portfolio to somebody else's job. Same with internal trade. And that kind of tells you that they're keeping those seats open, not for people who are currently in caucus, but because they hope at some point to have, I suspect, a bunch of by-elections to bring in the people that Mark Carney would have if he'd had months to prepare for an election rather than a couple of weeks. Now, that being said, the list that Althea gave you mostly involves what would be considered safe Liberal seats at this point. So if you're going to talk someone into coming, you basically can say, well, you know, you probably will win the election. It's not going to be a huge fight to win a by-election. Yeah. We'll see, and that presumes the government survives. That's probably plan A. Government survives, budget then does this. Plan B, we go in an election and all these star candidates show up.
It would be hard not to be a little bit cynical watching this, though, Andrew. You know, people who just wanted an election, either leaving, cynical? Yeah, a little bit. I'm just speaking for myself. Leaving cabinet to get these positions that the Prime Minister has come up with, be appointed to diplomatic positions, and you know, we might find ourselves with 3, 4, maybe more by-elections in the new year, right after having an election. I don't know. I don't know what that tells us about the people that chose to run again, the importance of being in cabinet. I don't know what it tells us.
I don't know either. But while we're being cynical, I can't help noticing the timing. Maybe it's coincidental. But Ms. Freeland leaving right after it's revealed that she may have misled Parliament, inadvertently or otherwise, in the matter of the BC Ferries contract, where she told the House that the federal government had no involvement in it, even as Liberal officials were meeting behind closed doors, discussing how they could spin a $1 billion loan for the purchase from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So maybe that's coincidental, but it's awfully interesting. We've got committees clamoring for her to appear and explain herself on this, so maybe a good time to get out of Dodge. But look,
maybe, although she was looking for a way to get out of Dodge before that. I would say
the timing is interesting.
Sure.
But look, any prime minister is going to want to put his own stamp, his own style, particularly when he's coming in, replacing a very unpopular predecessor. And yes, one does hear that he wants to bring in some people from the corporate sector. I've heard a couple of names in the last couple of days. This is a business liberal. He reminds me more and more of a kind of an early 60s Pearson liberal in style and in content. That would be in keeping.
Chantal?
I hope he has noticed that since the Pearson 60s, women have taken seats at the table that they're not planning to give up to return to that golden era. And let me be uncynical for 2 seconds.
Please.
I think Chrystia Freeland's talents are better used in those new endeavors than they were sitting back at transport. It does make sense after 10 years in the business to look around and say, I've held all the top jobs. I'm not going to become the leader and the prime minister. She does have talents that can be more productive for Canada on the Ukraine front than sitting trying to figure out what Air Canada is trying to get itself into.
Yeah, and we're also told she's got other things that she's considering internationally and otherwise, so that won't be the only thing probably that she ends up doing. Althea, last word to you.
I was going to bite on your cynical comment and just say, this helped explain why Mark Carney was so eager to have a by-election to get Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons, and why you heard no Liberals complain about the price tag of that by-election.
Because he knew he was going to have to do it soon himself. Is that what you're inferring?
Yes.
Does it tell you something, though, about the way he formed that first cabinet, that maybe he knew what he was doing, that he
I think it's very clear that he did not really. I'm sorry. Like, the immigration minister needs to be shuffled. I don't know what happened with that vetting process. And there are other people who, it's not just the opposition who has that viewpoint. So I think that there would have been a cabinet shuffle even without these departures. This just makes it a much wider one. And I'm not sure that, frankly, she can survive until 2026.
I think there's a lot of questions around the public safety minister as well.
The public safety minister, all right. And Chantal, last word there?
No, I think you can figure that this cabinet is like the one that we saw just after the Liberal leadership, not meant to go the distance.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Appreciate it. That's At Issue on the National. We're going to keep talking next about Quebec's Bill 21 and concerns from Ottawa about charter rights, the notwithstanding clause. You can catch all of that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. With that, I'll send things back to Adrienne in Toronto.
Hey, thanks, Rosie. Up next, deep underneath the European mountain range, a major milestone.
Today we celebrated the first cross-border breakthrough on the Italian-Austrian state border.
A historical tunnel, one big step closer to completion. So, what is this? Well, you are looking at a job well done, finally. Workers in both Austria and Italy breaking through one last layer of rock. Why are we talking about this? Pardon the pun, breakthrough. Because this moment was nearly 20 years in the making, and this is now the longest tunnel of its kind in the world.
This is an engineering milestone. Today we celebrated the first cross-border breakthrough on the Italian-Austrian state border. There was one wall of rock left between Italy and Austria. So we had an excavation machinery on the Austrian side, and this machinery broke through this last wall standing on the state border. The moment when we were able to do the final breakthrough, it was kind of pure joy. This bold vision, connecting Europe, connecting Italy to Austria, it finally becomes reality. The Brenner Base Tunnel, with its 64 kilometers, will be the world's longest railway tunnel. There is an existing historic railway line that takes about 80 minutes. When the Brenner Base Tunnel will be open, you will be able to travel the same stretch within 25 minutes. So this is a game changer.
All of that is true. Yes, it is a game changer. Slight detail, it won't open until 2032, 16 years behind schedule, and 2.5 billion euros above budget. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.